Okay, we're going.
All right. Well, hey, welcome everyone. Welcome chamber members, and thanks for being here on a chilly Friday that's about to warm up soon, which is good news here in central Minnesota. My name is Matt Killian. I'm the president of the Brainerd Lakes Chamber. Nice to see everybody once again. It's been a long time since we've been together in person. By the way, we're looking at restarting our networking events at the end of March, so watch for that. Welcome to Eggs and Issues. This is the second consecutive year that we're doing this event virtually. So our format today, we've been joking around, it's BYOE, bring your own eggs. Unfortunately, we don't have the hospitality of Madden's Resort this year with the wonderful smells of eggs and bacon, but we're looking forward to being there again next year, Matt. It's an important event. This is an important event every year. We hear from our legislators, and that's very important. But it's also, I'd say, equally important that they hear from you. And that's really what the interaction of this event is all about. And to remind you, the chamber, the Brainerd Lakes Chamber, along with the Cross Lake and Pequot Lakes chambers, we unite with between 40 and 50 chambers statewide as part of the Minnesota Chamber Federation. And we adopt a common set of priorities. We're going to hear about some of those priorities today. We operate in a nonpartisan manner, and we're very, very proud to be the voice of business for the Brainerd Lakes area. In order to do this work, it really takes a team of people to be successful. So if you'll indulge me for a minute, I'd like to recognize a few groups of individuals. Number one, first and foremost, our Lakes area legislators who made time on their day off today to be with us. I can't say enough about this group and how these are truly the champions of small businesses within our area. So thank you, legislators. If you know how to use the applause emojis, please give them a round of applause for being with us today. We really appreciate it. Secondly, another team that I'm very proud to work for is our board of directors. And we're just going to put their names on the screen here so you can get a sense of who's on our board. Great group of community leaders, great confidants to me. And they set the leadership and the strategic direction for the chamber. Next up, and this is the group that is responsible for today's event, is our Government Affairs Committee. Some overlap with our board, but these are individuals that advocate on the local, state, and national level for our small business interests. So they deserve a lot of credit. You're going to hear from some of them today as we ask the questions. And then last but not least, certainly not least, is all of you. We have about 1,050 or so chamber members. That places our chamber within the top 5 chambers in the state of Minnesota by total membership, which is pretty darn amazing for being the size of the Brainerd Lakes area. And so your perspectives, your engagement is so important to get these business messages out. And then the next group, which we truly, truly appreciate, are our business champion sponsors. It doesn't take a lot of dollars to do this work, but it takes some. And we're very proud to have Benefit Innovations and Q Square's convenience stores, Xcel Energy, Clifton Larson Allen, the Brainerd Lakes Community Foundation, Essentia Health, Franz and Bacon Trust, Just for Kicks, Trinity Business Partners, Whitseth, and Cub Foods on board funding this work. And thank you, all of you, for being the sustaining contributors. And instead of breakfast, giving some dollars to the chamber to support our work. We very, very much appreciate that. And as I transition now, I want to introduce our presenting sponsor of the event today, which is Xcel Energy. Xcel Energy, I need to say, has been a great supporter of not only this chamber, but so many chambers throughout the state. And I'd like to introduce my friend, who is truly my friend. We've been on the boat a few times over the summer, Mark Ossendorf, he's on our Government Affairs Committee. He's going to give us a little update on Excel's work in Minnesota and in our local community. So take it away, Mark.
Thank you, Matt. Good morning, everyone. And as Matt indicated, welcome to Eggs and Issues 2021. Hopefully this pandemic will get behind us soon and we can do these things back in person. But until then, we're going to meet virtually. We're all probably used to this, but we're working to stay safe and get back to normal. And from transportation to tax reforms, the Brainerd Chamber is the voice of business in the local community. They bridge you with connections to local, state, and federal elected officials. The Chamber's Government Affairs Division is the key to business needs and getting your messages across to elected officials. And events like this are your opportunity to share your voice directly with those that are making decisions that influence your business every day. Next slide. So again, at Xcel Energy, we are building Minnesota's energy future, clean, safe, reliable. Next slide. And we are transitioning to a low carbon natural gas future as your gas provider in the greater Brainerd Lakes area. This is important to you, and we are taking steps to clean up the gas system. Next slide. And we are voluntary participants in the Natural Gas STAR program. This is an Environmental Protection Agency program where we are reducing methane and implementing technologies and practices that document voluntary emissions reductions through collaborative efforts to reduce methane emissions. The Natural Gas STAR program partners are successful improving performance, increasing natural gas supply, saving money, and protecting the environment. Next slide. And Xcel Energy plays a big role in the Minnesota economy, from local spending to good jobs. But we spent $785 million in 2019 boosting Minnesota economy, running our businesses. Xcel Energy provides more than 6,000 jobs in Minnesota. And through our matching gifts program, the company matches employee and retiree gifts dollar for dollar. And those go to local nonprofits in the communities that we serve. And the matching gift program is intended to support our employees and retiree investments in organizations that add value to the communities. And in 2019, we're number one also. The $5 million that went to the United Way, and then we are your number one property taxpayer in the state of Minnesota in 2019, the tune of more than $200 million. Next slide. And lastly, we are investing in the greater Brainerd Lakes community. We have closed on property in the Pequot Lakes Heart of the Good Life development. This is a rendering of a proposed service center, natural gas service center we plan to build. We expect to break ground this spring and probably move in sometime in December. So thank you everyone for coming. Appreciate the opportunity to address you. And with that, I'll turn it back to Matt.
All right, Mark, thanks a lot. And again, thanks. Xcel Energy is a great Minnesota company, but it's also a great local company. I can't say enough about their commitment to the Brainerd Lakes area, and specifically you, Mark, to our Government Affairs Committee and to our chamber. So thank you. Well, we're going to get right into it. And let me explain the format here, and then we'll kick off with our legislative panel discussion. The format very basically is going to be what you've experienced in the past live. So we're going to start out with some opening comments. We will pose 5 questions that we've prepared in advance, and they're going to be asked by various Government Affairs Committee members. And then we're going to quickly transition from that into your questions and comments. And the way that you're going to ask those, given the size of the group here today, we're going to ask you to type those in chat. You can ask those questions at any time, and we'll take them in the order that we see them. I want to just emphasize that there's lots of issues, and the legislators can attest to this. There's lots of things going on. Our chamber focuses on business, more specifically small business. So we're going to focus on that topic: business, jobs, and the economy. That's what the Eggs and Issues event is about. I don't expect, like a candidate forum, that every legislator is going to take their full time and answer every question, but we're going to give them the opportunity to do that today. Sound good? All right. So we'll start out with opening comments here, and maybe I just ask you for your perspectives on the legislative session. You've been there for about 2 months now. And what are some of the most important business issues, business priorities that you're focused on? And Senator Gazelka, if you don't mind, we'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. As far as the session, it's slightly easier than last session because we've sort of figured out Zoom and all the craziness. The 4 priorities, just first of all, is get the vaccine out, particularly the people over 65, because everything improves after we get those folks vaccinated. Then we have to balance the budget, and the governor wants serious tax increases, mostly on businesses and wealthy, and I'll just say we're not going to do tax increases. And then Senate File 1 is get our businesses back up and running without the governor's mandates, so that they can run safely and follow CDC guidelines, but not under the heavy hand of government. And then the 4th one is get our kids back in school. All the science shows that all the way through K-12, they absolutely should be in school 5 days a week, unless they're homeschooled or something else. And we'll say, we say charter schools do it. I'm not charter, but parochial schools do it. States around the country have all their kids in school. Most other countries have their kids in school. And so those are our 4 priorities, but certainly tax increases for businesses that the governor wants, we're just not going to do.
That was the phrase of 2020 is you're on mute. Sorry about that, guys. Thanks, Senator Gazelka. And I'm just going to call on people randomly, if you don't mind. Representative Lueck, you're the number 2 person on my screen. Would you mind chiming in with some opening remarks?
Well, thank you, and good morning to everybody. It's a lot warmer than it was a couple of days ago. The things that Senator Gazelka laid out really is kind of the big picture. I will add another one that's not going to be helpful to business and particularly rural Minnesota is the governor's current breakneck race to impose California auto emission standards and California auto standards on the state of Minnesota. I see that as something that I would hope everybody that agrees that we don't need to start mimicking California would jump in here. And I think the chamber plays a huge role because we're cut out of this. The governor knew he could no way come to the legislature and expect us to swallow that. It would have been dead on arrival. So he's doing it through the rulemaking process, and it's open right now for written comments. And I would hope that everybody out there that doesn't want government telling you when and how you're going to buy your electric vehicle in the future would make a comment that this is a felony stupid idea. It doesn't fit Minnesota. So that's a big one, and it's happening right now. We've got until end of March, I think, when that comment period closes, but he is absolutely bent on jamming this down our throats, and it's unacceptable. He's totally went around the legislature on this one. But other than that, I just add that to Senator Gazelka's comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And we'll get into that that California car emissions a little bit, hopefully at the end here, but I appreciate you bringing it up. Senator Ruud, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. And I guess I would echo Senator Gazelka's comments. One of my frustrations down at the Capitol is that as hard as we are working to get businesses open, we are not open at the Capitol. It's the people's building, and there's no people there. And our staff is working remotely, and we have senators that from the other side of the aisle that have not been there in over a year, not been to their offices, not been on the floor, not signing bills, nothing. And we are not open. And yesterday, I did a forum with the Soil and Water Conservation Districts, and Representative Heinzman was on that with me. It's the first time I've seen him in months. This is the first time I've seen Representative Poston in I can't tell you how long. We are not, their building is totally shut down. We're not allowed to even walk through the tunnel and go see them. I think we have a hobbit that runs through the tunnel that gives them bill jackets. It is really not the way that we are supposed to do business. And so we have senators that don't want to come to the Capitol and open up our business. So opening up your business isn't a priority for them because the fear factor is pretty amazing. There is no reason why we can't do business at the state capitol, none whatsoever. Our committee hearing rooms could be socially distanced, they're sanitized, we have all the equipment to do it. But we just have legislators that don't want to, because if we open up, then we have to let you open up. And that's a big frustration for me. I don't think that they want to open up things. And if they let you open up, then they have to come back to work. And they need to get back to work. I go down to the Capitol every week, just like I did before. I'm in my office. I'm available. If someone wants to make an appointment, they can come see me. If they don't want to come to the Capitol, I'll go meet with them. We need to be back in business. We need public input and to get our job done. So, okay, there's my soapbox.
All right, thank you. No, that's a great point on reopening government at the same time we look to reopen businesses. So thank you for that. You mentioned Representative Heinzman, so that sounds like a great segue. If I think you're on the line, Josh, if you don't mind chiming in.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Glad to be here this morning, and I would echo the comments of each of the legislators that has just spoken. I'll piggyback in my intro here on Senator Ruud's comments that the Capitol, it isn't something to be taken lightly at all, and it's super important that it's open, and it is the people's house. And Senator Ruud, you mentioned how difficult it is for us just to get in an opportunity where we can communicate with each other. I'll point out how this process has hurt the public's opportunity to engage with their legislators. Great, if you can Zoom from the McDonald's parking lot in Aiken, you might be able to watch a committee meeting, but most people are really struggling, to especially in Greater Minnesota, to interact and let their voice be heard. This last session, there's been a big change for me. I'm the lead Republican on an environment committee, that's the policy committee and the finance committee. So I got a heavy load. Dale commented on the clean cars issue. That's absolutely huge impact to our communities across the state of Minnesota. And, not just clean cars. And that issue is so devastating to Greater Minnesota's economy. But also a number of other issues are being pushed through MPCA that we're tracking closely, and I hope that people are paying attention. One that's on the radar, just on the horizon, is PFAS. If you're not familiar with perfluorochemicals, you should be, because they're absolutely in everything, from your cell phone to your clothing. And MPCA would like to make sure that those chemicals as a whole are labeled as a hazardous material. And you think, well, if it's dangerous, well, why isn't it a hazardous material? Well, because there's lots of versions of this compound, this chemical, that are used in everyday life, and in most cases cause no harm to human health. But in order to start the process of rulemaking, they wanted it to be a hazardous material. That impact to our municipalities, to your businesses, even a ski shop, for example, could potentially be on the hook for a cleanup, as ski wax contains a form of PFAS if MPCA comes in and finds that it's impacting water. So these are some of the things we're tracking, along with the tax issues and the budget and so on going forward. So it's just a huge plethora of issues to be following, and I just want everyone here to know that we're absolutely covering every single thing as it comes through the legislature. But it's a sure more difficult challenge with the process that we've been forced to use.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that. A lot of people don't, because they're not testifying or they're not engaged, they don't realize the challenge sometimes that the lack of human interaction can have down there. So yeah, thanks for pointing that out. I appreciate that. Representative Poston, will ask you to do the opening comment here, and then we'll transition into questions.
Good morning, everybody. I just want to start off by saying, thank you for having this meeting. This is really, really important to us legislators. I will say I agree with what the senators and the representatives have said. I'm going to bolt on a little bit to what Representative Heinzman said, because I'm not sure that the public is aware of this. But your voices are really not being heard right now on the House side. For instance, in our committee meetings right now, because they're done on Zoom, we're limited on time. And very often we don't get the opportunity to ask questions. We don't get the opportunity to interact with the author of whatever bill we're discussing. We really kind of get shut out in those committee meetings. And there are many things that we would like to talk about or bring up from our neck of the woods, so to speak. So this is a clunky system. It's a timeout system. Some of the chairs have been really good at bringing it right down to the wire so we don't get to get our input. And that means that the people that we represent don't get their input. So it's a clunky system, like Senator Gazelka said. It's getting a little bit better, but it still creates a lot of problems, and we're not being heard as well as we should. Thanks.
All right, thank you, John. Appreciate that. We are going to move into our first question here, and I'd like to introduce another friend of mine who is a past Chamber Board Chair and Government Affairs Committee member, Ben Thuringer. Family owns Madden's Resorts, and he's going to talk about reopening businesses. So take it away, Ben.
Hi, good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here, and thanks to our representatives as well. It's tourism, which is my topic, and what I love to talk so much about is such a huge thing. When I first started on the chamber board with Matt, the chamber really transformed into supporting our tourism industry, and that was Matt and his staff that did that. And then when this pandemic hit, what can we do to reopen and support our industry was right on the forefront of the chamber. And it was one of the first chambers in the nation to do that. It was really, really remarkable. And Matt and his team just did a fantastic job. Sometimes what happens is hospitality and tourism get taken for granted. And as I talk about reopening Minnesota, why it's so important to have a pathway forward, right now there's 116,000 jobs sitting out there waiting to get back in full time and have a stable tourism industry. Dollars wise, that's $16 billion annually in sales within our state, or $42 million per day. Not something to be taken lightly at all. I will say the consumer confidence is there. It's shutdowns that are holding us back right now. Throughout Minnesota last year, Minnesotans stayed in Minnesota and supported our industry. And I know that this goes for a lot of our resorts. Usually we rely on a large amount of corporate traffic, but social traffic sure did step up. The consumer confidence is there. At Explore Minnesota Tourism, I'm the resorts representative for the governor. And we call it revenge tourism is what we're about to see. People are saying, I'm sick and tired of this. I am going to get out and have a vacation in Minnesota. And we're really hoping to see the restrictions lift so that we can service that area. Last week, Representative Baker proposed a plan that would slowly but surely open up Minnesota. It was a 3-phase plan. In business, all of the business owners on this call realize that planning is so important, and having a stepped phase is really important. And that's what Representative Baker's plan is asking. And everybody on this call, supporting Representative Baker and his bill, that's so key. It's so key. we need to get those market signals in place. Otherwise, what's happening around our state is very large conferences that come in nationally and internationally. They're going to Wisconsin. They're going to North Dakota. They're going to South Dakota. It's really bad. We need to get those market signals in place. Opening things up on a Friday before that Saturday isn't going to work. We've seen we're getting people vaccinated. We've seen the rates dropping, as Senator Gazelka was saying. The rates have dropped really low. Deaths have dropped really low. It's time to get things going. So I might ask. I always point this out right behind me. Between Brainerd and Cross Lake in the 1950s, there were 171 resorts. There's a couple dozen maybe now. So we don't want to see that trend continue. That needs to stop. So my question would be, what is your outlook for working with the governor to reopen business? And is the legislature considering anything additional for financial support for the hospitality industry?
And thank you, Ben. Senator Gazelka, you've had the most contact, obviously, with the governor throughout the whole process. Would you mind kicking us off?
Well, I'm not terribly optimistic. I've tried about every venue to get the governor to play ball, but so as far as the governor and emergency powers, I think it's just going to be the pressure of the fact that with the vaccine coming out and the trends going down everywhere, not states that have done all the restrictions, states that haven't done the restrictions, it's frankly about a 1% different infection rate, 4% in Minnesota, 5% in Iowa. So combine that with the fact that the vaccines, we've had a million vaccines out. As we get the people over 65 that want the vaccine vaccinated, the death rates are just going to drop to hardly anything. And it's always been about our seniors. I think it's 139 deaths in Minnesota total under age 50, one school-age child. And so what I think is going to happen is pressure is going to build. By May, we're going to have, I believe, everybody over 65 that wants it vaccinated. So suddenly it's going to be, Governor, what are you waiting for? I mean, we're putting forth bills to make him move forward, but frankly, unless the House Democrats agree that emergency powers should end, we cannot end them. But so my optimism is in mostly the people and the pressure that I think will come forth. I put a lot of pressure on the governor to open up schools the last couple of months because all of the data shows it's safe. They can no longer say science says they shouldn't be in school. That's just not true. And as a result, he did a press conference this week saying, hey, we need to get our kids back in school. And I heard from school board leaders that it was our pressure. So the pressure of your industries is, I think, probably the loudest voice that the governor needs to hear. Ben, when you talk about you got to have lead time, I so agree, but you got to get that pressure to the governor.
And thank you. John, Representative Poston, I like the idea of raising your hand when you want to chime in, and you've done that. You have the Homer Simpson hand up. So we're going to call on you. If anybody else wants to raise their hand, we'll do it in that order. So go ahead.
Thank you, Matt. And Ben, thank you for your comments. Some of those numbers that you mentioned are staggering. I will tell you that it's been very difficult trying to communicate with the governor. He doesn't respond to emails. He doesn't respond to phone messages. He just isn't communicating with legislators, especially in the House on the right side of the aisle. But I will tell you that probably all of us are working on some legislation to move businesses forward. And I will tell you one that's going to hopefully get across the finish line and will affect your business at Madden's. That's a bill I'm working on that would say that the mandates for event spaces have to be the same as they are for restaurants. So in your event space right now, you can have 50 people for a wedding reception. This would mean that you could have 50% of the capacity of that event space. And that isn't great, but it moves us forward a little bit. And the constant messaging and the constant moving us forward a little bit at a time is how we're going to get this done. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Senator Rude, I see your hand up.
Thank you. Well, we actually moved a bill forward this last week. We've had two hearings on it. And it's not so much about getting the businesses open, it's when we do get them open. Mike Schwieters was kind enough to be on our testifier. And what the bill does is we pass it out of policy and then we pass it into the Finance Committee, which they have a great deal of interest in doing it. And it's marketing money. We know that our hospitality industry has really is going to lack the dollars. They're just hanging on to keep in business, and they're going to lack the marketing dollars to bring people back into the state. And so what this bill does, it grants, I think it's a $1 million grant and $1 million grant, and it's strictly for marketing so that all the different groups that work within the Explore Minnesota Tourism can use this money to bring people back to Minnesota, to send the message that we're open, to get the conventions back. You know, in Breezy Point here, we have 12,000 timeshare rooms that are sitting vacant, and we need to get people back. So this is, we call it the emergency marketing bill for tourism and hospitality. We know that we lost 41,000 hospitality jobs just in the months of December alone. So we need to get the message out that Minnesota is open, and I'm hoping that we can get Minnesota open. But when we do, we have to be ready. We have to have the ability to say to the market, we're open, come visit us, come bring your conventions here. So that's what that bill does. It got really good support. And Senator Ingebretson, who has the Finance Committee, is very interested in moving that forward. So we'll see with the budget forecast if we have the dollars to do it. But I think it's an important piece to get us back going.
Yeah, thank you. And the Brainerd Lakes Chamber has actually been a beneficiary of those emergency marketing grants, and we're putting those to good use. And when we talk about hospitality, I think it's good to point out that we're not just talking about lodging. We're talking about restaurants, we're talking about attractions and events and all of those things. So that's a big part of the Brainerd Lakes economy. And that's why our area was hit harder than a lot of others through these shutdowns. So Representative Heitzman, can we move over to you?
Now, this is something that we've all been tracking closely since the start. And you know, what's most painful, I think, is when we do, like we mentioned earlier, look across the border and we see businesses and economies wide open, and people from Minnesota actually crossing over into those economies to participate there and driving right by all of their local businesses while they do that. It's been mentioned already, but I will echo the frustration of the legislative delegation here today, that our letters and our communications with the governor's office has been incredibly frustrating. In most cases, we do not get a response. In some, maybe we will hear from a commissioner and maybe have a conversation, but most often not. One of the key issues with weddings and that particular venue in the area is something that we've worked on extensively in the House. We spent almost an entire legislative day debating legislation with our DFL counterparts. Representative Poston, you worked really hard on that, and we're co-author on that legislation along with myself and Representative Lueck as well, working to try to open up wedding venues, and we've discussed certainty in the industries and trying to make at least some kind of a plan. Early on in session, we saw the governor in a matter of days shutting down restaurants with really no heads up. So, you know, inventory sitting on the shelves, perishables going to waste, really no thought, it seemed, as to what the impact of that might be. And hopefully, as he I'm assuming, going to feel the pressure, begin to make those adjustments and work with Republican leaders to try to use those benchmarks and build a plan. But in the meantime, we're not just going to sit around twiddling our thumbs. We're going to be pretty hard, and in some cases, we've had to do like we did on the venues issue, and take a couple of hours and just go through step by step by step what the issue is and why the governor absolutely is wrong on keeping these venues shut down. Going through the science, going through the numbers with the governor, because I don't know who he's getting his information from. He's not revealing that. He's not showing us the data that he's using to base his decision making on. So we're presenting the data as it comes out of his own agencies. And I'm not sure that he's necessarily paying attention, but I hope he is, because Minnesotans are being crushed. And if they're willing to continue to do business in the state of Minnesota, there better be a path there for them to do that.
Yeah, well said. We couldn't agree more. And we certainly have seen the heartache and hardship firsthand. So I appreciate you saying that. Representative Lueck, we'll get your comments on reopening, and then we'll transition to some other topics.
Yeah, real quickly, and I believe, Ben, you mentioned Representative Baker. We've got two folks that have really got a strong background in the hospitality and business world that are leading the charge in the House. Representative Dave Baker, he actually graduated from Haken High School and been in a wide variety of stuff. His brother-in-law happens to be the gentleman that owns Paul Beck's County Market at Aiken, so he's been into business ever since he started dating one of the Paul Beck girls. He and Barb Haley, Representative Barb Haley, are working in two areas. One is to force the governor to lay out a plan. In other words, plan your work and then work your plan to get out of this. We're not going to plan for a 4th of July parade in Crosby because it might rain. We plan for it, and if it rains, well, we may make some adjustments. To force him to be looking, how do we get out of this? Because there's a big blinder there that strikes me, is we're not focused on getting out of this mess. We're focused on what we can't do. So that's one thing. And I say there'll be a bill, I believe I got first reading last night that Dave has been working on to put some predictability down the road. Okay, by this date, we need to be here. The other one is we have to ultimately change the mechanism that the governor is operating under, because nobody foresaw it years ago when they put this emergency order statutes that we're dealing with now, but it just has got a loophole in it that allows the governor, in a circumstance like this, where we do have a longer range issue to deal with than a tornado or a flood, to hold on to his emergency powers until there's not a single case of COVID-19 on the face of the earth. Think about that. We've got to fix that. That's a longer range thing, because we do not want to set up any governor in a situation where he can, for the best of reasons, take power, ignore the legislature and block out the citizens and just run this like a dictatorship. And I use those words in all sincerity. He is simply doing the best he can, but he's got blinders on. So there's two big areas that we've got to fix. Get some predictability and get focused on getting out of this mess and not what we can't do. And also to put that long-term fix in, so never again can a governor run away with all levers of government and just shut us out like this. And so a lot of long-term work to fix, but our job's never done, as they say.
And I know there was a couple of measures. I think the first one was Representative Baker's bill that involve the legislative leaders in making those executive orders and business restrictions. And there was another one maybe that came out of the Senate that would be a super majority, the same way that you'd have to vote for a bonding bill or something to enact that. And we'd certainly be supportive of that. I think this was well worth the time. We're a little bit behind, so maybe we'll move into a little bit of more of a rapid fire format here, about a minute per response. But the next issue, I'm going to turn over to Jim Hokanson. He's a CPA at Clifton Larson Allen, and he wants to talk about balancing the budget. So Jim, if you're on, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Matt. Senator Gazelka stole some of the thunder from my question to start with the not supporting any tax increases. But just for background of the rest of the folks on the call, currently Minnesota is projecting about a $1.2 billion deficit for the next budget cycle. In addition, in the governor's proposed budget, he's proposing an additional $1.3 billion of spending increases. And much of his proposal relies on tax increases in order to fund those gaps, including increasing the corporate tax rate and adding an additional tier on individual income tax rates, which affects many of our small business owners who have passed through entities and ultimately pay that tax on their personal returns. And in addition to those, there's a number of other tax increases in his proposal while we're trying to get the economy to recover from some of the COVID losses that we've endured. So at CLA, the vast majority of our clients are pass-through entities, and we regularly see the high tax burdens be a limiting factor on the company's abilities to reinvest in their companies and invest in their workforce. So given that we've already heard that there's not a lot of support from at least our local legislators on tax increases, what do you believe is the best approach for balancing the budget, which we're required to do based on the state constitution, and to help our economy recover?
And Senator Gazelka, we're not going to always start with you, but I think this would be an appropriate question to have you weigh in on first. So would you mind commenting a little bit about the budget process?
Sure. We do think that we should have been reducing government spending back to last April, when we knew that we were going to likely move into a budget shortfall. And we were only asking for a small percentage. Other states had did it, but the governor chose not to do that. So now we're at this spot today. We do have over $2 billion of reserves, and without a doubt, we can do that as a secondary measure to reducing spending. And that'll likely be the scenario, because we will not raise taxes. We didn't do it the last 4 years. We're not going to do it now. But there'll be a tug of war. The one thing we think we should do in the tax provisions is the tax conformity to Paycheck Protection Program. I did try to get that done last year. The governor was opposed. I think he's starting to get more pressure from his side of the aisle too. So we'll see what happens there. But we have to pass the budget. If we don't, our government shuts down. We can't print new money. So it is a tug of war without a doubt. But I've made it very, very clear that tax increases are not going to be part of it.
Thank you. I'm just going to call on people at random unless you want to raise your hand. But Representative Poston, what are your thoughts?
Well, I agree with what the senator just said, for sure. I think we can do this without tax increases. I think we're going to have to use the rainy day fund. I think we're going to have to cut back on agency spending. And Jim, thank you for your comments. I will tell you that I hate to tell you this, but on the House side of things, and I don't think this is true in the Senate, thankfully, we are sitting in committee meetings right now and being asked to appropriate more money, to appropriate more money, to appropriate more money for things that are clearly not on this priority list that Senator Gazelka laid out for us earlier, and we all agree with. So it's not just looking for more taxes and the spending that we've heard about so far. We're continuing to be asked for more. So we're in a battle on the House side of things to say no. And it kind of feels like the last couple of years we've been battling all of these issues and trying to hold them off and using the Senate as a backstop. And this year looks exactly the same. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative Heinsman.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. You know, this last election cycle, there was a lot of conversation about the budget because we knew early last year that there was going to be a likely downturn and a reduction in our budget and potentially the scenario that we're looking at. And in fact, there had been predictions that we were going to see a $5 to $8 billion deficit. And we were asking the governor, please talk to your commissioners, get the agencies to reduce their costs, reduce before we actually get to this point. And of course, looking at the information today, it appears that not one FTE was reduced system-wide in state government, while the private sector has been bleeding jobs, specifically in hospitality, and people have been seeing hard times like they haven't seen before in a number of subject areas, number of economies. So, you know, it's incredibly frustrating, but at the same time, we're really lucky. Well, we could have been looking at a much worse deficit, while at the same time, this problem could have been solved 8-9 months ago if agencies had tightened their belts just a little bit. We wouldn't have a deficit at all. But of course, raising taxes is always the solution, you know, from one side of the aisle, and it just isn't an option. We can't be doing that, especially as the private sector is doing absolutely everything they can to reduce their budgets. Why in the world would we ask them to pay more? You know, moving our corporate tax rate to the second highest in the entire country. I'm sorry. The governor's out of his mind if he thinks he's going to do that in this economy and that we're just going to go all full steam ahead and be fine. You can't do that. People will leave.
Yeah, thank you. Would anyone else like to chime in here on this particular topic? Otherwise, we'll keep moving on. I have a number of questions to get to.
Thank you, Matt. I just would like to comment on, so my portion that I am responsible for in the budget is the legacy amendment. And the reason why that's important is that's a very healthy fund right now. And we put in place, we had people look last year before we passed the legacy and take the cuts necessary. And we also put in every single fund, we put a 5% holdback balance for the rainy day. And we've had some rain. But we have a really healthy legacy balance this year. And why that's important is because we can't supplant any funding, but say the soil and water conservation groups, the governor didn't include them in his budget, and the Clean Water Council didn't include them in their budget. But because we have a healthy fund balance, we can fund them to the tune of $24 million, and that takes pressure off the general fund. And so a lot of agency things are funded through the legacy, and like the DNR and Bowser and PCA and the MPCA. And so we can still have a really good, healthy legacy bill that's funding those things that takes pressure off the general fund. So there's really no reason to be raising taxes when we have done a good job managing this legacy, because it helps the general fund budget. And so I think that going forward, those things have been funded and the pressure has been taken off, and there's really no reason to be raising taxes. So.
All right, yeah, thank you. Dale, I'm going to skip you, but I'm on this one, but I'm going to give you the first response on the next question that also has to do with funds and dollars here. And to ask that one, I'm going to turn it over to Matt Seymour, one of our former board chairs here from Q Squares Convenience Stores. Excuse me, Matt, are you on?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Be good. Well, good morning, and thank you everybody for joining with this Eggs and Issues. I'm the owner of Q Squares gas, convenience and liquor stores, and obviously the impact on retail has been significant over this last year. So my question is about the PPP taxability, and 2/3 of our chamber members received forgivable PPP loans in 2020, and for some businesses that was a huge vendors. It saved businesses, and it allowed them to keep people working, which was critical for our area and critical for Minnesota. And so the question, really relates to the Minnesota conforming to the federal tax laws. And if they don't, that means that those loans will be subject to Minnesota tax. And of course, the impact on that, just the time when businesses are recovering, or hopefully recovering, are looking forward to making it through until the all-important summer months. That tax could have dire consequences for our businesses. So what are the barriers for getting this fixed? And is this something the legislature can take action on? And when do we expect that to happen? So I'd like to get your comments on that.
Thank you, Matt. And interesting, I get several questions by email or phone message literally a day on that. The bill that would fix that in the House is sitting in the tax committee right now. The bill author is the tax committee chair, Representative Marquardt. What's standing in the way? Two situations. Certainly the governor doesn't want to see anything that would reduce potential revenue, because that means he doesn't have to touch the agencies. They can continue to blunder on, expanding uncontrolled. And very simply, gentleman by the name of Paul Marquardt, he's from rural Minnesota. Tax chair is a tough job, no matter whether you're what side of the aisle you're on. But there's your pressure point in the House. He needs, I get a few queries every day on this. He needs to be able to open his email up in the morning and have to have 3 legislative assistants sort through about 5,000 emails saying, get on with it. Because that's the kind of pressure it takes. That's got to come out of there and get moving. I think there's a bill over in the Senate. Hopefully can come loose. But yeah, that's gonna peen over with a sledgehammer the positive things that pay protection revenue created to try to keep us going. So it's there. We just got to kick it out of the tax committee's world over in the House. I can't speak for exactly where it's at in the Senate, but it's another example of where the governor, he's not looking down the road at how we get out of this in the best shape. That should be one of his priorities. Let's fix that.
And I'm assuming that all of you are on the same page regarding that. We're looking at $450 million statewide. I think there's been 25 states that have conformed. Wisconsin just conformed, I think. Maybe it's not been signed, but they just passed that bill. Any more to add on PPP taxability? Because like Matt says, that's 2/3 of our members that would be potentially affected by that.
Yeah, let me just say it's a maybe. We're trying to do it. I think the price tag's a little over 400 million, but it's one-time money. In other words, not ongoing. We have a bill that includes that, but it also includes some modifications to SALT, those deductions that once you get to $10,000, they're capped. So you don't get to deduct everything. So our bill has like 3 different provisions in it. I want to get them all done, but I'll take whatever I can get, frankly. The fact that we didn't get it done last year when we wanted it, that would have been the easiest year to get it done. But it all depends on how much pressure the governor and the speaker get, because if they want to do it, we are thumbs up to go.
Well, let's transition to a topic that we've discussed at least 2 or 3 times in the past, and we need to discuss it again this year, and that's what we'll all refer to as employer benefit mandates. And to ask the question here, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Quisberg from S&R Quisberg. You probably know them better by Cub Foods and Super Value. But Chris, if you're on, take it away.
Great, thank you, Matt, and thank you everybody for being here today. It's very nice of you to take time out of your Friday morning. But like Matt said, over the past years, we've seen bills that introduced that mandate certain employee benefits. Currently, it's in the governor's bill and it's in the House bill, and there are provisions that would provide sick leave and family leave and stuff like that, that it would be financially or financed by a tax on businesses. Such programs would be incredibly difficult for small businesses to manage, and we were worried about the potential for abuse, especially in our area where a lot of businesses, they double their business for the summer months, and we're afraid that that's when employees would choose to possibly abuse this law. Additionally, 12 to 24 weeks is detrimental to any business, but especially the small businesses who have very few employees to begin with, and to have to keep these jobs open for the hopes of the employee to return it's just absolutely not feasible. Many of us already provide competitive wages and benefits. If we didn't, we wouldn't be able to hire or retain our employees, which it's already extremely difficult to find employees as it is. We need to hold this line together to stop the mandates. What can we do to help these efforts, or how is that sitting in your respective houses?
And I'll let anyone jump in on that particular question. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Chris, if I could just say real quick, you're absolutely right. These mandates are coming towards all of us. And I hate to tell you this, but there's further mandates that are going to come out of the House because we can't stop them. But as I've talked to Senator Gazelka over the last few months, thankfully, our Senate is going to work on the priorities and not a lot of these policy bills and not a lot of these mandates. But there are actually even more of them coming at us. And, you know, we're pushing back on them in the House, but we don't have the votes to eliminate them from coming out of the House. So once again, we're going to depend on the Senate to stop this stuff. Thank you.
Senator Ruud, you want to say something first?
Well, Representative Poston is correct. The bills are flying fast and furiously. But as a policy chair, I have 5 committee hearings left until first deadline, which means all the bills have to come through the policy by that. And I think it's March 12th. And a lot of the committees only meet once a week. So some of them have just maybe 2 or 3 hearing times left before the first deadline. And I think we started this session saying, you know, we don't have the ability for public input. We don't have the ability to have people come to the Capitol. And so this is not the year to be doing major policy decisions. And so maybe next year, instead of going into session in February, we go back in January so that we can, you know, maybe things will have, people will have their vaccines, will feel more comfortable going back to business. But for me as a policy chair, I've made a conscious decision not to do any big policy issues. We simply don't have time, and we simply don't have the ability for public input. So I will get the things done out of my policy committee that need to be done. And some of that is holdover from 2020 that didn't get done because of COVID. But as far as tackling a brand new policy issue, I think that's kind of irresponsible in this climate of COVID. So, and I know Representative Heinzman talked about PFAS. I probably in my environment committee, it's the new buzzword. And so I probably have 25 bills that want to spend money on something that we need to have a big conversation about. It needs to have a lot of input, and I'm not willing to spend money that we don't have without having this big conversation about things. So time is limited to tackle big policy issues. We need to get done with the important priorities of the session. So
Senator Gazelka, did you want to add to that?
Well, I agree with what Senator Root said. So I don't see any of those happening. That in this regard, I think that's good for this group here. It just makes zero sense right now to even have a conversation about it. I do think businesses, frankly, try to provide the best benefits they can, and to force them upon any business just means that there's more automation, there's more directions they have to go. Rather, we should let businesses provide the benefits that they want, and let the businesses compete for a tight labor market right now. And so, you know, if they're not given enough benefits, frankly, that employee is going to go somewhere else. And so I think we're trying to fix a problem that really isn't there.
And to fix it with a sledgehammer. You know, I mean, it's one thing to talk about paid leave. It's another thing to talk about 12 weeks or 24 weeks funded on the backs of small businesses. So that's really scary for a lot of us. Other comments on this? Otherwise, we'll transition to the next question. All right, so our last prepared question here is from Tim Swanson from Franzen Bank. Sometimes I mistake him and call him Tim Franzen from Swanson Bank. I have to make sure that I get that straight. As Tim is asking this and people are responding, I would just say in a few short minutes here, we're going to get to the point where we're going to turn it over to you to ask your questions. I only see a couple of them, but we have a lot of people on the line. So if you had a question, a comment that you want to get in that chat box, it's right at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to that in a minute. But for now, Mr. Swanson, take it away.
Thank you, Matt, and good morning, everyone. My question relates to our current political climate. And I don't think anyone would disagree with the fact that we're living in a very divided nation and state, and it's only gotten more divided since the election. So the question that I have for each of you really relates to how do you navigate through this political climate, especially at a time when you're not able to get together and meet with some of your colleagues? I think that's a really big challenge, I would think. And then the other part of that question is there hope for finding common ground under this situation? So, thank you.
Let me take that one first, because it's very important to me, frankly, that the Senate is known for the people that solve people's problems. And so we work really hard at respecting the minority, even when we disagree. Frankly, my relationship with the Speaker, a liberal Democrat, is very, very good. We balanced the budget 2 years ago. We did police accountability. We did a bonding bill. We figured out how to navigate the fact that you're supposed to govern. And the governor it's frustrating now because he's taken emergency powers for almost a year. Prior to that time, frankly, we actually worked pretty well together. And so I think it comes down to mutual respect. If you have that, even with great disagreements, you can find a path forward. And so, frankly, I think Minnesota has proven that we know how to do it. We're I think the only divided legislature in the country. We had that distinguishing mark a few years ago as well, and yet we figured out how to do it. At the federal level, it's really, really difficult because every decision, every act is to make the other side look bad. I mean, you think about how much onslaught was against President Trump. It was just, and his responses back, frankly, at times were not what I would have said should happen. So, but people should be proud that Minnesota, frankly, at the government level is working. It may be, we fight for what we believe in, we fight for you, but in the end, we do govern, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, Representative Heinzman, I'll turn it over to you.
So Senator Gazelka mentioned a couple of words that you often hear in the political conversation, especially during election season. And I think it's meant very well because we are fighting for our constituents on many issues. When this session started and we saw that we were just short of taking back the majority in the House, Representative Dowd sat the caucus down and said, listen, we are in just the scenario that the question was presented, and I appreciate the question. We have an incredibly divisive public out there, and not that they themselves have the issue necessarily, but our constituents are angry on a lot of levels. And he asked our caucus to approach this in a different way. In the last cycle, there was all kinds of crazy stuff coming, and we approached it very aggressively, pushing back as loudly as we possibly could. And the challenge that our leader, Kurt Dowd, laid out for us was to be statesmen and women and approach these issues in a way that were more geared towards solving the problems, as opposed to some of the angry rhetoric. So our caucus has worked really hard in the minority to not elevate that divisive conversation, but try to offer real solutions. And our friends across the aisle, they know and can sense that we're working towards trying to find those solutions together, as opposed to just beating them up. And some of this stuff is so stupid. Let me tell you, it would be really easy to just sit there and beat them up, okay? But we're not trying to do that. We're trying to say, hey, wait a minute. Okay, so this bill that we talked about last night and the $35 million, we offered amendment after amendment as kindly as we could, trying to fix it. We don't want a slush fund that can be spent for all kinds of other stuff. We just want money to be there so that when other departments respond to an emergency, there's dollars to try and reimburse them for their time. And when the bill comes through and it's not as good as we'd like it to be, try to find those solutions. And that's the attitude that we've taken. So great question. And I think that's the approach legislators should be having as we are in a divisive or potentially divisive conversation.
All right. I'd love to spend more time on all these questions, but I do want to make sure in the last 20 minutes here that we get to some of our participant questions as well. And we started with a minute and a half, and then we moved down a minute. Maybe we'll move down to 30 seconds, and people can weigh in relatively quickly on these, so we can get through a lot of them. I'm going to try to summarize these in the chat. Becky LaPlante from Puringer Investments is concerned. I think a lot of landlords are concerned about the eviction moratorium. I think that first surfaced with the governor's executive orders. It's persisted since then. Nobody wants to kick anybody out of housing, but you need to be able to get the rent from tenants. What are your thoughts about that, and how could it be rectified?
It can't. The governor won't give up that emergency power. He said he'd give up emergency powers if I'd sign an agreement to make that indefinite. And frankly, it's been, I think, 10 or 11 months. You do have to reach a point where the landlord still has to pay their bills. It's been, I get that people are in a difficult spot, but that doesn't mean that you can approach it the way he is. So at this point, as long as he has emergency powers, that remains. I will say as soon as emergency powers end, that is lifted.
Yeah, and I think in real estate, we're seeing it's really brutal out there, and I don't know if the governor doesn't give some relief to the eviction orders, which I don't see him doing. It's something that he's just really adamant about, but he doesn't understand that people have to pay their bills. When the renter isn't paying their bills, who's paying the bills? And at some point in time, do we end up with the folks that bought these investment properties have no equity left in them? And so now we end up with a foreclosure problem. And we're very concerned in the housing market how this is going to affect us down the road. And I think it's a disaster just rolling down the hill right at us. And with the governor not giving up, and I think we see on a federal level too, it's the same thing. It's a really bad idea to keep this going.
All right, well, thank you. I'm going to keep on ticking down the list here. Deb from Benefit Innovations, who serves on our Government Affairs Committee, is asking about reinsurance. Maybe I'll rephrase that and just ask about health insurance in general. A few years ago, I know that individual market where a lot of people go to buy their health insurance before the reinsurance and some other things, that those rates were climbing by 25 to 40% a year. Some of the things that you did rectified that. And now we're hearing about a public option again. Generally speaking, what's the state of affairs with health insurance, which is so important to everybody?
I have an answer. I'm waiting for somebody else.
Well, I'll jump in, and it's critical we continue that. We were able to stabilize things, unfortunately. And again, this is where people just fundamentally disagree. There's a clear movement, sincere people that feel that government has got to take this over and run everybody's health insurance. And that's an example where you know, we're gonna have disagreement on that. I think the most important thing is to continue at least where we're at right now, and not slide backwards. We didn't fix things. We stabilized and slowed that unbelievably steep increase in rate for, you know, the rate structure that was just crucifying those that needed to get individual health insurance. So probably the senators have also got a perspective on that, but we need to just leave that alone and hang on to what we got. That is not at the top of the list, I would hope, in the governor's world. Let's get out of this mess, and then we can start again to look at how we can rationalize what we're doing with health insurance.
Yeah, just quickly, if we can extend reinsurance one more year through legislation, which would be good. That's what stabilized the market. We now have at least 2 providers in every county. We could have gone to no providers in some northern counties, so pretty important. They're being coy about it. We're not going to trade that 5th year for a public option. If you have a public option, basically what you're saying is the private market is eventually over. And so that will not be the compromise. And so we'll just have to see how it plays out. But reinsurance, even Amy Klobuchar, Senator Klobuchar, said that was a model that was working, and other places, frankly, have adopted it as well. So we'll see.
Ken Toole is asking about redistricting and the potential of losing a United States representative in the state. I honestly have not followed this as closely as I might have. But for those of you who do or you have, how might redistricting affect the Lakes area in the future?
I think the odds are we're going to lose a congressional seat, and it could simply be because of our bad policy. We've lost enough people to other states that it could make the difference, frankly. But for the last 50 years, the courts have decided the boundaries. The odds are, because they've pushed all the data out, we're not even going to get all the data till September. That my prediction is the courts will do it again. We're going to try, but you know, I think that's the scenario, frankly, and we'll just have to wait and see. It's typically they don't like to change the boundaries a lot. I do believe it's the Chief Justice that appoints the panel of 3 judges, and so we'll see. I mean, because we're getting the data late, it does complicate everything.
The next question here from Val Knudsen, Advantage Seamless. We're getting a lot of government affairs questions, which is great. Dale, I think you mentioned the California emission standards, and that's such an important issue, not only to our auto dealers, and we have great auto dealers that are very supportive, very community minded in the Lakes area, but also all of us, because essentially we'd be turning over regulatory authority to California, which it seems a little crazy to think about, but that's exactly what's happening. That could drive up prices of cars. It makes fewer of the more popular vehicles like SUVs and trucks available to consumers. And our chamber's taken a position on it. We just think it's a bad thing, especially to do outside the legislature. Thoughts on the car emission standards that has been raised here in the last year or so?
Oh, we actually just had the hearing on a bill. Senator Matthews has a bill to stop the rulemaking from the governor. He's done it really by himself again. And so we had a really good hearing on Wednesday. We had lots of testifiers. Of course, it was a very interesting hearing. Senator Matthews did an incredible job on it, and it is now been passed out of my committee into Senator Kiffmeyer's State Government Committee, and I'm sure she will do a very good job on it also. You know, we've had hearing after hearing on this, and the MPCA Commissioner, Laura Bishop, has promised me for over a year and a half that she would get the message out to Greater Minnesota, because I don't think our people really have had the opportunity, and it hasn't happened. And she said that, you know, COVID happened, but during a presentation last week, I said, you know, Greater Minnesota citizens need to know about this, and you haven't been forthcoming. And I found out in the presentation that Brainerd has one of the biggest MPCA buildings, and they're responsible for 11 counties, and they're right here in Brainerd. It's one of their biggest agencies. And so right here in Brainerd, the MPCA is right here, and they can't do anything to let the 11 counties that they represent there know about California car emissions. And I find that astounding. And so I think the MPCA has tried to do this behind everybody's backs. It's not necessary to do this. We just heard from the major auto dealers that they're going down this path on their own. They have a goal of 2035 on their own for more electric cars. And this is another example of how the market is working. As people want more cars, as the technology advances, we will see the car dealers and the car manufacturers respond to market dictates. That's what we should be doing, not giving over our ability to legislate in Minnesota to California.
We do have a bill in the House, if I remember right, Representative Heinzman is chief author of that one. And I'm on it, that would take that away from the commissioner of MPCA, that rulemaking authority. I've told her point blank directly, if MPCA continues down this road, they can anticipate that the legislature is ultimately going to have to take back a huge amount of discretion that agency has been afforded on rulemaking. It makes sense. We don't need the legislators trying to decide whether it's 5 parts per billion, 200 parts per billion. There's technical areas that are properly done through the rulemaking process. But this is not a technical thing. This is turning over the standards to an unelected board in California, and their governor already is working on something that a few years down the road, you're going to have a huge percentage of those vehicles, either zero emission or low emission. And I'll tell you, Senator, you're right on. There is a reason why MPCA is being very quiet about this, because they do not want people to know what they're doing. And that's a terrible thing to have to say about our state government. But I'm being boldly, bluntly honest. They're trying to slide this thing through, get it on the books, and it'll become an enforcement issue out there with our car dealers. And every time you try to if you bring a car in from out of state, I lived in California for a number of years, and you do not want this. You could take it to the bank. You do not want this mess. Again, it's very disingenuous to what's going on with our executive branch and this whole thing. And it's really hard to compromise with people when they intentionally keep this quiet. And that's exactly what's going on.
And Representative Heinzman, you have your hand up.
I do. Just two things that I think need to be on the radar. I'd love to talk about my bill, but as you're hearing sort of the conversation building, one thing that MPCA is doing is they refuse to say California cars. And there's a reason for that, because Minnesotans know what that is and they don't want it. And so every time we remind them that this is California cars. And the reason that it's important is because if you're fill in the blank state, you don't have the option of adopting some other state's emission standards except for California. Either that or you comply with the federal rules. There is no such thing as Minnesota clean cars. This is California's emission standards shoved down the throats of Minnesotans. So that was one thing I just wanted to quickly mention so people know when you hear the rhetoric, we are not talking about creating our own standards. This is about shoving the California standards down our throats.
And so Matt, you can't tell that we're really passionate about this, can you? Because the temperature even on the screen just raised, right up. Woo! Yeah, we're pretty passionate about this issue.
Well, let me hit another one that I know that will get a lot of attention, and it has in the past week. I got this by direct message, so all of you won't see it, but someone's asking here about recreational marijuana and legalizing that. I'm not sure that the PC term, something cannabis, adult cannabis or something. The Chamber doesn't have a position on it, but we're certainly concerned about workplace safety when you think about heavy equipment and drivers and manufacturing, and it is an illicit substance on the federal level. So, what the state doesn't necessarily exempt people from some of those issues. What do you think about recreational marijuana?
We're not going to do it on recreational pot, but I am open to any medical reason that that shows that there's a medical use. We're open to that. We're open to discussing drug sentencing, but we do not think that recreational marijuana is good for our state. We'll let other states go out in front of that. As we look at the data, it does not show that it's good. And we realize that polling seems to say that people might vote for that, but we'd really want to make sure we have enough time for people to see that it's sort of like the opioid crisis, where suddenly it's like, what in the world are we doing? We have this huge crisis and we spent a lot of money to address that. And why in the world at the same time we would say, okay, now let's do this for marijuana. We're gonna have the same problem. So, so that it is an interesting subject. There's the folks that want to call it cannabis because it sounds a little better, but when you say pot or marijuana, people aren't quite as enthusiastic about it. So that's my personal position. I believe it's also our caucus position.
Other comments?
If I can just say a couple of things real quick, Matt. I'm a no along with Senator Gazelka, and I think our caucus over in the House is as well. And we've been doing a lot of research on this, and I just will tell you a very interesting story that I just read. Colorado was one of the first states to legalize. And recently they went back to all the legislators that voted yes and asked them how they would vote today. And it was overwhelmingly no. And that's because the unintended consequences are incredible. In fact, they make some statements like $1 million worth of tax income into the state cost the state $11 million in unintended consequences. So every state that we look at that has done this, it's not good. And it's being pushed in Minnesota for many reasons, but one of them is because they think it's going to be a good source of tax revenue, and it will not be. Thank you.
Matt, I'm just going to quickly jump in. I serve on the Health Policy Committee, and that is the Preventative Health Policy Committee. And one of the things that might be interesting today to hear would be, we just heard yesterday, no, days are running together, Wednesday, legislation proposed by the DFL that would ban flavored vaping products. And, you know, that's interesting because on one hand, the DFL is looking to ban flavored vaping products, but on the other hand, they want to legalize in House File 600 recreational use marijuana, which very interestingly comes in all kinds of very kid-friendly flavors like wedding cake and blueberry gum and just on down the list. I'm sorry, they have a messaging and I could say a lot of other things, issue on this topic when they can see that there's a problem in one category as it relates to nicotine in kids, but then on the other hand, they want to legalize a product that comes in the exact same flavors and is appealing to kids. We've got to address that. And legalizing this product has absolutely no, makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, I would just add that this idea that there's a golden goose out there that somehow this would benefit the state of Minnesota with all that wonderful tax money. You know, that's again, that's not looking at the facts out there. You know, we have to reach a point where we're not willing to sell our soul for the eternal dollar. And frankly, that's where I see this going if they continue on. They say medical marijuana it's certainly got a place, but to just open this up, we know that it damages young kids. There's no question. If they fool with it at the younger age, they're going to suffer permanent brain damage. That's been in the books for years. And so why would we, in the interest of, quote, new tax dollars, go down this road? It just doesn't make any sense.
Matt, if I could add one more thing in to this. The dispensaries in the states that have legalized this, the pot is so expensive that it's created a bonanza for the guy that's selling pot on the street corner. And that's the pot that you don't know what's in it. That's the pot that kids are using and kids are dying. You know, they've been able to increase their profit margins. They're able to carry a huge amount of marijuana without being charged. So there's a lot of scariness about this, and so I'm glad that we're going to continue to push back and say no.
Yeah, well, we're at time, but I do want to leave you, I want to say 15 seconds because I think you'll take 30. But closing comments, what you'd like the local Brainerd Lakes area business community to know, and we'll start out with Senator Gazelka.
Thank you for what you do. I'm done.
All right. Thank you. And I'm just going to keep on going down the list here. Senator Ruud.
Yes, thank you for what you do. And I do want to say a special thank you to Matt, because during this pandemic, Matt has been very instrumental in getting information to us, to sending us things, and hosting a community meeting. At first, it was every week because we were in this pandemic, and now it's been, you know, we stretched the time out, but getting the community leaders together to just have a good conversation, and it really helped me to help the community. And my hat's off to the Brainerd Lakes Chamber and to all of you who facilitated that. It was a help the whole community through. And I think our chamber is and all of our businesses are just really such an asset to us. So hats off to you and thank you.
All right, thank you. Representative Poston.
You know, I will say thank you also, Matt. you know, you guys do an awesome job. We really learn a lot every time we interact, and it's appreciated. I would say stay in touch with us. You know, we're easy to get a hold of. Email us, social media, call us, text us, whatever works. But we like to hear from you, and you're all appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And Representative Lewick?
Well, I want to echo my thanks and keep that information flowing. You folks are doing an excellent job on pointing out the things you see at your level that we can't see from St. Paul, and certainly the governor doesn't see, so we can continue to bring them to his attention. And I just want to end on a little more optimistic note. I think we are coming out of this. The challenge here is let's plan for success. Let's get some markers out there and work toward them. And I think we're fully capable of doing that. I will even admit that the governor's probably slowly, but very slowly and cautiously moving our way on, let's just get this thing opened up and let's plan for success and get on with it.
All right, and Representative Heinzman, you have the last word here.
Well, just to summarize how grateful we are, this legislative delegation, for the foundation in our communities, the businessmen and women that are the glue holding this community together. We recognize that, and we're so grateful for each and every one of you. I think that Dale's message is right on point. We have a lot of reason to be optimistic. The governor can't keep this up forever. And I think the interesting term, the takeaway that I heard, and I was just kind of processing, was revenge tourism. Well, I think this economy has a lot of pent up power. And I think that it has that opportunity going forward to recover in dramatic fashion. So let's stay optimistic, and we're going to keep going forward. I think there's a lot of reason to have hope.
Well said. Thank you to all of our legislators for the time this morning. We appreciate that on your day off, and we appreciate everything you do on behalf of our community and our business community. I want to quickly thank once again our board of directors, our government affairs committee, our sponsors, and everyone who attended today. Have a great day. Thanks for indulging us for a few more minutes. And if you need anything, email, connect with these guys, or do it through the chamber. We really appreciate everybody. Thanks. Have a
Matt,
great-
I love the fact that you think that we have Friday as our day off.
All right, well.
Business 7 days a week. You're stuck with us 24/7.